Good afternoon. Welcome to The Briefing, a co-production of Now This and The Appeal. I'm Emily Galvan-Almanza, and I'm really excited to be joining our guests today to talk with you about reimagining the restaurant industry post-pandemic. Today, we'll be talking about fair wages for food service workers and how the struggle for fair wages has been made much more urgent by the COVID-19 national emergency. We'll be joined by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Saru Jayaraman of One Fair Wage, Charles Almanza, no relation that we know of, a restaurant worker in New York, Elisa Liu, the owner and executive chef, of Elisa's Love Bites in Bushwick, and a leader of the Restaurants Advancing Industry Standards in Employment Association, which includes 800 restaurants. We'll also be joined by Tabina Gibson, a bartender from Chicago, and Dan Simons, a restaurant owner in DC. So let's start with some context. 10 million restaurant workers have been laid off due to the COVID crisis. Tipped workers in the millions, including waitresses, moms, people who make wages of $2 an hour plus tips, receive wages so low that they are now being denied unemployment insurance. States are telling them that their wages are so low, they don't meet the minimum threshold to look like full-time work, so they don't get unemployment insurance as a result. Ruth's Chris, meanwhile, gets $20 million. So let's talk about that. I'd like to introduce Saru Jayaraman, who is an academic at UC Berkeley, president of the One Fair Wage Foundation and co-founder of ROC United, a national restaurant workers association. She was named one of CNN's top 10 visionary women, a White House champion of change, a James Beard Foundation Leadership Award winner, and the San Francisco Chronicle's Visionary of the Year. Saru has authored Behind the Kitchen Door and Forked, a New Standard for American Dining, and has appeared on MSNBC, HBO, PBS, CBS, CNN, and now, of course, Now This and The Appeal. She represented restaurant workers at the Golden Globes in January 2018 with Amy Poehler as part of the Time's Up action to address sexual harassment. So, Saru, can you talk about whether there's, and forgive me, I'm going to make the pun, whether there's an appetite for change in the restaurant industry amid the COVID-19 crisis, and just kind of break down for us why a $15 minimum wage is important?
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily, for having me and many of my colleagues that have been working on these issues for a very long time on today's show. Thank you to Now This and to the Justice Collaborative for featuring this really important issue. It's important because, as you mentioned, 10 million workers have lost their jobs. You're looking at an industry that before coronavirus was almost hitting the 14 million worker mark. So almost 1 in 10 Americans working in restaurants, 1 in 2 Americans having worked in the industry at some point in their lifetime. I think you said you yourself.
Yes.
In the restaurant industry, that's pretty much everybody.
20 years ago, I was making $2.13 an hour.
And it's still $2.13 an hour. And so huge segment of our economy, of our population, of our workforce in America, but being paid the absolute lowest paying wages in America, which was already devastating, was already a problem, a largely female workforce, raising children, single mothers raising children. But COVID, as you said, just completely exposed the unsustainability of that system, the untenability of 10 million people in America with nothing to live on the very next day. We call it living tip to mouth, that they had tips one day and nothing to feed their kids the very next day. And that fact that it's exposed what really shouldn't have existed in the first place, deep inequities that should not have existed in the first place. That fact has allowed for a lot of openness, a lot of new conversations, a lot of ability to make change. Among workers. Workers have come together and are saying, this is not right. I have worked for 20 years or sometimes more in this industry, and now I'm being told that I didn't earn enough to qualify for unemployment insurance. That's just not right and probably should never have existed. So there's a new appetite among workers to speak up and say, no, I don't think we should go back to $2. But there's also incredibly a lot of new appetite for openness among restaurant owners and employers, which I really want to credit the employers on this call both the workers and the employers on this call, Charles and Tabina, who are here, who are workers, and Dan and Elisa, restaurant owners, who represent a growing number of restaurant owners around the country that are coming together with us to say, this system didn't work really for any of us prior to coronavirus. And we are much more aligned than we thought we were. And let's work together for a new vision for this industry, one in which we all can thrive, and hopefully one in which we're a lot more resilient so that the next crisis that comes along doesn't devastate us the way that we're being devastated right now. And so we were seeing this incredible new openness, appetite for change in the restaurant industry. I'm really excited that, Dan is somebody that we've gotten to know each other over the last year or so, and really excited that he's on today's panel and can talk a little bit about some of the things that we've come to learn from each other. So huge new appetite for change, but honestly, we were coming together with people from other sectors, seeing an equal openness, appetite for change in other sectors, in criminal justice, in reproductive justice, in education. I mean, every part of our lives and our world, A, are being exposed as needing change for a very long time, and B, as potential opportunities for change. And so we created a coalition under the banner of Reimagine. We can't go back to the way things were. We have to reimagine a new world in which things are different. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Reimagine campaign, if that's okay.
Yes, please. I actually, we have a video to share. It's #Reimagine. The campaign is the Reimagine campaign. And we have this video that you brought us that's amazing, with elected officials and food service professionals and others, kind of not just talking about the impact of the pandemic on the restaurant industry, but more broadly on some of the other areas you've talked about, and I know we all are very passionate about. So yeah, I'd love to share the video.
Yeah, let me just tee it up real quick to say that we are a coalition of really unlikely partners, business leaders, workers, economic justice advocates, reproductive justice advocates, folks working to transform the criminal justice system, folks working to transform food and farming, and racial inequities, so much more. We've created this website, thereisnogoingback.org. And I just want to read a quick quote from that website. It says, "We will not go back to normal." It's by Sonia Renee Taylor. "Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than that we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We don't just want to return to normal, we want to reimagine what normal should be." And if this pandemic has exposed anything, it's the fact that we are so interconnected. It's the fact that we rely on one another as humans, whether you're a CEO in the 1% or you're a low-wage worker, we are interconnected. We depend on each other for our survival. And it's that interconnectedness that forces us to have to take care of one another in every way. And so we brought together some of these leaders to create this video. And as we're showing it, I just want to encourage everybody watching to please, on Twitter, share your own vision for what our world, your life, your business, your community could be, how it could be different, with the #Reimagine, because we're really trying to push everybody, including our elected officials, to say we're not going back to the way things were. We must #Reimagine.
And let's make it trend.
Yeah.
Watch a video. All right, we're going to pull that up for you right now.
I think we need sound.
Over the past couple of months, COVID-19. My name is Neil Franklin. I'm a 34-year police veteran and executive director for the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Over the past couple of months, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed policing. Police across this country are now practicing social distancing, and it's resulting in thousands of fewer arrests being made every week for petty offenses. And this is being done without compromising public safety. And we all know that introducing fewer people into our criminal justice system is a good thing. Police now have the opportunity to focus upon violent crime. Police have the opportunity now to redirect its limited resources into community-based crime reduction strategies. And police have the opportunity to dramatically work upon improving police and community relationships. Reimagine policing. Reimagine our justice system.
Hi, I'm part of an unlikely coalition of progressive businesses, farmers, and organizations that are focused on workers' rights, reproductive justice, criminal justice, and racial justice. We've come together to assert that the pandemic has exposed all of the structural inequalities facing our nation, and that it must stop here. We must reimagine a new interconnected world and fight for it. There's no going back, we can only go forward, and we must do that together. We stand for investing in infrastructure for a sustainable future for the generations to come, putting an end to our petro past.
My name is Irene Lee, and I'm the chef owner of May May Restaurant here in Boston. When the COVID crisis is over, I am excited to reimagine what paid time off, healthcare and health insurance, and mental health care and wellness looks like for my staff. Hashtag reimagine.
My name is Sylvia Enriquez, and I'm the co-director of All Above All Action Fund. During this pandemic, Congress and state legislators use the pandemic to restrict or even shut down abortion care. This forces people to have more medical visits, travel farther for care, and put themselves more at risk. And the harm falls hardest on those who are already at risk during this pandemic, especially women of color. Reproductive healthcare providers are doing everything they can to protect patient health, from implementing telehealth to bringing medications curbside. After the crisis, let us reimagine innovative ways to improve access to reproductive health care so that we have the health care that works for everyone.
Hi there, my name is Lorraine and I live in New York City, where I've been a bartender / waitress for the past 5+ years, aka a tip worker. And after the coronavirus epidemic, there is no going back. And the way I will plan to move forward is to advocate one fair wage plus tips for all my friends and family and coworkers who were affected by this whole pandemic situation.
My name is James King. I work as state campaigner for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, a national organization that works to advance racial and economic justice to ensure dignity and opportunity for low-income people and people of color. I primarily work in policy, trying to bring about criminal justice reform and aid decarceration efforts. This pandemic has revealed in stark terms and vivid colors the systemic inequities in our criminal legal system. Reimagine a world in which you are not punished according to your social economic status. Hashtag reimagine justice.
Hi, my name is Drew Rivers. I'm co-owner of Full Belly Farm in Northern California. We are hashtag reimagining how to strengthen the ties between all farms and their local communities and consumers. Hashtag reimagine.
That is so fantastic. Sarah, I really want to talk with you all about the campaign and the sort of details and the policy behind the campaign. And so we're going to come back to you in a second. But first, I wanted to introduce our next guest, who is another friend of this campaign. It is my enormous pleasure to introduce Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, who has been a changemaker since she arrived in Washington. She led the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which banned gays from openly serving in the military. She serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and she is the first senator from New York in 40 years to serve on the Senate Agricultural Committee. So she supports paid family leave, a federal jobs guarantee, and the abolition and replacement of the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Most recently, I think it was earlier this week, she's been a champion of the Postal Service, coming out with the big policy, the Postal Banking Act, which recognizes that the USPS is not only essential infrastructure, it's also a key tool for economic inclusion, especially in regions and industries where institutional banking is unavailable. And now Senator Gillibrand is working alongside food industry and restaurant service workers to protect hardworking people earning sub-minimum wages. I'm also very proud to say she's my senator. So, Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to One Fair Wage President Saru Jayaraman for inviting me to join today's town hall and for leading this really important movement. Thanks to Dan Simons for being here and for being an advocate for the service industry and the people at the heart of it. And thank you to Emily Galvin Almanza for the introduction, and to The Appeal and Now This for bringing us all together. And most importantly, thanks to all of you, restaurant workers and food service workers who have joined us and who are taking such important action to advocate for each other and to change your industry. I can't think of a better way to spend May Day or International Workers' Day than getting to hear directly from you about the issues facing today's working community. I know that times are tough for you, and I want to thank you for taking the time to share your stories with me. Our stories and our advocacy efforts are especially critical during this time and this crisis. We are all in this together. And that's why I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to hear directly from you, to talk about what work needs to be done to help people and small businesses survive during this time. Small businesses like restaurants are the lifeblood of our economy. Before this crisis, nearly 1 in 10 people working in New York State worked in restaurants and food service jobs. They and this industry are feeling the effects of this pandemic in ways few others are. I've been fighting to ensure that we get relief to small businesses in every community and that no one gets left behind. The interim relief package we passed last week includes $320 billion for small businesses and new rules to ensure more businesses have access to the funds. Nearly 1/5 of the funding for the small business loan program will be set aside for smaller lenders, and the relief package also includes $60 billion for communities and small businesses in underserved areas. We don't know when this crisis will actually end, but we do know that it will end. And when that day comes, things won't be the same as they were before. We need to use this time that we have right now to decide what we want the future to actually look like. Simply going back to normal is not going to be an option for any of us. Normal wasn't working for most working people before the crisis, and it's not going to work after. This is time for bold, transformative new policies that reshape our workplaces and our country. We cannot ask people to go back to work for as little as $2.13 an hour. Eliminating the tipped minimum wage and increasing the minimum wage will be good for all workers, their families, and for the health of our economy and for moving forward. It's also critical that if you get sick or you need to care for a family member, you can stay home without worrying about missing a paycheck. I introduced the Paid Leave Act, which would provide everyone with emergency paid sick and family leave, creating a safety net during this crisis and providing a transition to permanent national paid leave, a permanent national paid leave program once the crisis is over. The more I hear from everyone about what's going on in their communities, what's working, what's not working, the better job I can do in Congress. Some of our best policy ideas come from you. They come from my state. They do not come from Washington. So I really appreciate you telling your stories, sharing your concerns. I'm ready to listen, and I'm very excited to take your questions and have a conversation together. So thank you again for putting this great forum together.
Senator, thank you so much for that. We actually, we wanted to kick off with a question that's based in some really interesting, groundbreaking polling that came out. So speaking of what constituents think and believe, there's a new report out today from the Justice Collaborative Institute in collaboration with Data for Progress. And the report is about how voters actually support raising that minimum wage for all workers, including the sector of workers who rely on tips. Saru, who's on the panel, is an author, and she's also director of the Food Labor Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley. So this report shows that an overwhelming 78% of voters, including an overwhelming majority of Republicans, support changing the federal minimum wage laws to include restaurant workers who earn tips. As we talked about, right now the minimum wage is $2.13 an hour for workers earning tips. And my question for you, Senator, is if this appetite exists among voters, if the voters want to make sure that all workers earn at least the federal minimum wage, what's the path to making that the law?
A couple of things. First of all, this is the kind of thing you could do state by state with ballot initiatives, which I think New York State should lead, because when states try to do something, it's easier for the federal government to build on those successes. So I think that would be a great first step. Second, federally, we have a bill that we can keep pushing to support in Congress. We have the House. They will pass it. If they haven't already passed it, they will pass it in the House. And in the Senate, our biggest challenge is Mitch McConnell. He does not believe in getting rid of the tipped wage. He does not believe in a living wage, and neither do most of his Senate, Republican Senate colleagues. So politically, I'm working to flip the Senate. I think it's really important that we put people in charge that represent all of us, that look like us, not just the current Republican Party that does not represent our values or our goals. So I've been working on at least a dozen campaigns around the country to try to pick a new players list who will support eliminating the tipped wage and starting the minimum wage at $15 an hour and then indexing it to inflation so it grows with the cost of things.
Yeah, it seems like he's not representing that 78% of Republicans who want to change the minimum wage.
Nope.
So we have a number of questions for you from our audience, which I'm going to read before we move to some of the folks who are joining us live here. One question comes from Paige in my home state of Iowa. And Paige writes, I'm a single mother of two. I have a 7-year-old boy and an 8-month-old baby boy as well. I get a little help from one father, but that's all the money I've had since I lost my job in the food industry as a server at the beginning of March. The restaurant I've worked for 5 years, and my main source of income to support myself and my 2 babies, has temporarily closed due to COVID-19. I am not eligible for unemployment benefits as my wages were too low in the last 6 months to qualify. I've been relying on my tips at my job to survive and pay bills, which are not reported. That also is affecting my unemployment benefits. I have not received a stimulus check yet. There's no payment date listed for me either. I'm facing eviction at my home now because I'm about to be 2 months behind on my rent and I have no money coming in. I need to find a new place I can afford to live within the next 30 days before my boys and I are out on the streets. But I have no money to help with that, and I am desperate to find help. I've applied anywhere and everywhere possible to help out with no luck yet, since the volume of applications coming in is so high. How can we work together and make sure everyone gets a full wage, but isn't entirely reliant on tips once the crisis is over?
So a couple of changes, and we've talked about most of them already. We have to eliminate the tipped wage, get to a living minimum wage. We should start at 15, index it to inflation, and let it go up from there. Second, I believe in paid family and medical leave. I wrote a bill to allow every worker to take 3 months off to the extent they need to for a sick loved one, for themselves if they're sick, or because schools have been closed because of the pandemic. Whatever reason you have to stay home, it's there. Sick days, make those universal. And then I think housing's a big issue. And I know that the Congress, particularly Senator Schumer and the Democrats, are going to be working on a way to alleviate the housing crisis, because a lot of people aren't getting paid at all during 3 months. And so how do you, when you finally get your job back 3 months from now, pay back rent? I mean, it's almost impossible. A lot of states, and Iowa I don't think is one of them because they have a very conservative governor, a lot of states are saying there's a moratorium on evictions for the 3 months or 4 months of COVID, however long it lasts. And that's helpful because you don't want to be homeless. But if you owe 4 months of rent in September, you're screwed because you won't have had any income to pay it. So we have to figure out a way to deal with that, and whether we can do it through grants into individuals, amplification of unemployment benefits, some kind of program